Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Lucy Hodes, Senior Vice President of Meeting Communications for CCA, and I will be your host. I hope everyone is safe and in good health. Today's webinar is Data Management in Uncertain Times, Responding to Shifting Data Demands, sponsored by ClearSky Technologies. We're very pleased to have them as part of our Wednesday webinar series to deliver content to you, no matter where you might be working. We have two presenters today, both are from ClearSky. First is Ron Willett, President and CMS. Ron has been working with carriers for more than 16 years, and in his role at ClearSky, he's responsible for driving revenue, maintaining service stability, and meeting profitability goals. Ron is also a current CCA board member. Next is Frank Danielson, SVP of DevOps. Frank has been the lead infrastructure architect at ClearSky since he joined the company in 1999. During his time in the industry, he has been creating real-world solutions for wireless service providers, from the launch of the first browser-equipped handsets to the creation of the revolutionary Total Traffic Management Data Network Optimization Service. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit them at any time, and we will get to the questions at the very end. Also, just wanted to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on the CCA website after it's over. So now, Ron, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate it. Hearing Frank been there since 1999 makes him seem old, but he started very young at the company. So for me, I got up this morning, worked out, put on a suit, took a limo around the block, and now I'm ready for this professional non-video presentation. Or, like many of you, I have on my CCA 2018 t-shirt. Thank you to OSG. And I've worn it for 3 or 4 days in a row now. But that's kind of the point, that things have changed, habits have changed, and because of that, subscriber behavior on your network has also changed. So we'll look at the agenda. We'll spend a little bit of time, very little, going over ClearSky and what traffic management is. I feel like if you're on this webinar, you probably have an idea of what traffic management is. And then we'll get right into looking at some of the data traffic trends of our customers, what they've done during that, to the policies that they've done to help relieve their network of some issues, the results that they came up with. And then after that, we'll look at just some popular policies that our CCA type carriers put in that aren't COVID related. And then we'll look at the reporting capabilities. And finally, we will have some questions that we will be able to answer for you. All right, so ClearSky Technologies, been around for a while. We were infrastructure as a service before it was cool. We were the first non-carrier to host a WAP gateway, as you can see over there in the 2000s, 2001. And then a lot of you might be familiar with our iCode A2P service, and that's where we do short code campaigns, and we help out carriers with that. And then, of course, today we're talking about TTM, which is our Total Traffic Manager. And that's been around since 2012, so it's been around for quite some time. I have a lot of carriers on that and have a lot of experience writing and managing policies. You can see there the footnote in 2020, we were purchased by Astra Capital during the middle of this pandemic, which was a lot of fun and very good. And I just wanted to have that note there. So traffic management. When you talk about traffic management, I wanted to put down, 5 or 6 things that most people know about with traffic management: video optimization, roaming control, things like that. When I talk to my family about what traffic management is, I always say, when you see the commercials for Verizon or T-Mobile and there's an asterisk next to their unlimited plan, that we provide the asterisk, right? So it's standard video only on unlimited. Sometimes, your speeds might be reduced to 3G speeds during congestion. All of that stuff that they have on there is stuff that our Total Traffic Manager can do, and any traffic management system should be able to do. So those are the high-level things that most people use traffic management for. So during COVID, of course, we saw some differences in the way people used data. And really, it was, I tried to break it down to 4 that we noticed a big difference with. Increased overall data demand. Obviously, we've seen a lot more people using data on their phones, and that's for a lot of reasons. Information, they wanted to get more information on what's going on with the pandemic or COVID-19, a lot of video conferences, homeschool, and then bored kids. So that all is going to increase overall data demand. Video overwhelming networks, that's, along the lines of increased overall data demand. But I wanted to break that out because video has become such an important part of the data networks. We see some of our carriers have 60, 65% of video as part of their network usage. So I wanted to break it out and show some examples of what people are doing to help with that. Change in congestion location and peak hours. Obviously, with stay-at-home orders, a lot of us aren't going to the office. They're staying at home. A lot of networks are built so that you can handle congestion during the day in downtown areas, and those aren't being used as much. And the residential areas are being used a lot. So we'll look at some change in congestion location, and then peak hours is another thing that we've seen changing, and we'll get to that. And then lastly is the increased use of communication apps. So especially where you are regionally depends on this, but we've seen a lot of increase in like Facebook Messenger and that kind of stuff, but also WhatsApp for our friends that are on islands. We've seen a lot of WhatsApp usage, but just all kinds of instant messaging usage has increased. So we'll get right into some slides here, some graphs of overall usage. So here you can see, unfortunately it says before and during because there is no after yet, but we continue to keep an eye and monitor on that. So I picked out some Fridays, Friday, January 10th, you'll see there, and that's what I consider before everything started happening. I think most of us were leading semi-normal lives on January 10th. And you can see there that their traffic, their peak usage was at about 27 megabytes per second. And then over here, we picked Friday, June 5th. So this has been going on for a while, and you can see that their traffic has increased to 33. So that's a 22% increase in overall usage. Some other things to note is the time they're hitting certain things. So it's not just that their peak traffic is higher, it's that overall, almost all day long, you'll see that their usage is much higher than it was. For instance, in the left-hand graph, the Friday, January 10th, you'll see that they hit 25 megabits per second at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, whereas on the right-hand side, they're hitting that amount of data at 9 o'clock in the morning. So people are using data, they're using it a lot, and they're using it at different times than we are used to. Here in the next slide, this is a carrier that has a little bit more traffic, but I wanted to kind of give an example of both. So you can see here that their peak usage before was at 111 megabytes per second, and they increased that to 133 megabytes per second, 20% increase. So if you look at the two slides, 22% increase there, about a 20% increase there. So that's what we're seeing really across the carrier networks. We're seeing a lot of increased data demand, and we're seeing it throughout the day and at different times. And of course, the peak usage there is very significant. So why are we having this increased overall data demand? So, of course, you can't talk about video demand in the COVID-19 days without mentioning Tiger King and our good friend Joe Exotic. If you don't know who that is, then you haven't wasted some of your life watching that show. But I know a lot of people have, and that things like that. Disney Plus obviously was a big kicker. The information awareness, going to the different websites. If you're at the beginning, I was looking every day. Where's COVID at? How many? Is it growing? All that stuff. So all of those are things that people were doing on their phone. And then of course, bored kids means PlayStation, Xbox, TikTok, and Fortnite. So if you don't know what TikTok is, you probably don't have a daughter. So the policies that we put into place to save capacity, and this is for carriers that were having capacity issues and they needed some relief. So we enforce the fair usage of all traffic at times and places of heavy usage. Video control was a big one, as I mentioned. So a lot of times we optimize video to 480 during congested hours and then cap video at 720 network wide. 720 is still HD, but it's not 1080. And there's probably 3 people in the United States that can tell the difference on a phone between 1080 and 720. So, you know, making these changes saves a lot of your capacity. It really makes a difference on your network, but the overall subscriber experience doesn't really change, and in fact, sometimes improves. And Frank will talk about that in a little bit when we go more into those policies. And then, of course, prioritize real-time applications and move background data to non-congested hours. So what that is, you know, PlayStation, Xbox, things like the Google storefront, they send these updates in the background, and those updates can take up a lot of bandwidth. And sometimes people aren't even really waiting for an update of, you know, Candy Crush or whatever, and they're trying to watch a video and they don't understand why their video isn't working well. So what we do is we prioritize those real-time applications and we move those background data to non-congested hours. So we do that in the background. So they'll still get their downloads, they'll still get their updates, they'll still get all that. They just won't get it during the peak hours when people are trying to interact with these applications. And so, Frank, do you want to talk to this slide a little bit?
Sure. So like Ron said, you know, there's different types of traffic on a network, and they can't all be treated the same. So what we found is just simply adjusting someone's speed is very rarely the best solution. So because depending on the protocol you're using, sometimes it has adverse effects. So we found that adjusting priority and tuning for subscriber experience is really what's helped us the most. So in this particular example, and this happens on every network we've looked at, there's a certain amount of what we call background traffic. In this case, it's a category of traffic we call software updates. And they're not just normal Android and iOS updates, they're Windows updates. There's a lot of Xbox and PS4 game downloads, even on mobile networks. That's one of the most interesting things we see on them. And that traffic, that file download is always going to be the same size. There's nothing you can do to make it smaller. So you're always going to have the same total volume of data on the network from that file transfer. So we really can't hope to change that fact, but what we can do is change how it affects other traffic. So every network has times and places that are busier than others and times and places that are not as busy. So in this example, we put in priorities and conditions. So based on conditions, when the network got busy and capacity started to be an issue, we deprioritized that background traffic, those software downloads, in order to have it take up less of the network resources during that busy time. And you can see the effect that had. So over in that gray U-shaped area, you know, that traffic was building along with the rest of the network. And then once the network reached a certain level of usage, we push that down. I always make the analogy of making balloon animals. If you can squeeze part of that balloon and it'll get smaller, and that air just moves to other parts of it. So we freed up some capacity while the network was busy to let those foreground apps have priority, so people would have a good subscriber experience on what they saw. And then as soon as that time of busyness was over, we relaxed that, and you can see that those downloads picked back up, and you know those file downloads were allowed to complete. So that's how we were able to deal with the fact that those file downloads and software updates were never going to get any smaller, and we just simply move the bulk of that traffic to times where it wouldn't cause a problem. Can you go to the next slide, Ron?
Yeah, so the next slide talks about carriers that didn't have capacity problems. So we do have a lot of carriers that had capacity issues, but there are some carriers that have plenty of capacity. And so it wasn't a problem with them. So they still wanted to do something. So obviously earning goodwill in the community, our carriers are big proponents of the community. And so with homeschooling and work from home and other essential needs, what they saw was that people were using more data, and that meant that they were going through their data plans a lot faster than they normally were. And a lot of people were furloughed or laid off. And so they wanted to, do something to help. And bandwidth, it's not a commodity. It can't be set on a shelf and saved for tomorrow. So what they did was they used doubled the data programs. And so, if someone was getting 3 gigs on their plan, they doubled it to 6, and they did that at no extra charge for their subscribers, just to earn the goodwill. So, doing that is something that's great, but then there's the devil's in the details always, right? So that meant that our usual notifications that went out at 75 and 90% of their normal usage, we didn't want to send those because they were getting double the data. So there was no reason to send those. So we canceled the normal notifications. We sent the notification of the doubling when they got to 100%. So you can see there, that was the verbiage that we used. Your data limit has temporarily been doubled until July 1st. And so we can, whatever the carrier wanted to put there, we put whatever verbiage they want. And so we were able to do that. And then we set up where they would get the usage alerts at 175 and 190% of data usage, so they could know when they were close to their doubled. So we started doing this a few months ago at some carriers. And of course, as this has gone on and on and on, we keep extending it. And, when the carrier says that they want us to stop, then obviously we'll take those policies out. And the notifications we did those notifications through SMS or pop-up pages. And again, it's whatever the carrier wants. And then, the important part of this is, as you'll see throughout when we talk about our TTM, we include a certain amount of professional service hours because we want people to use the product. So, this was a result of a product team calling up saying, hey, what can we do? We discussed some ideas and we came up with it, and we implemented the policy and we put it in, and there was no additional cost to the carrier. This is all part of just the service that we do. So this was from, obviously a current customer during the coronavirus. And Frank, if you can talk a little bit about some of the policies we put in. You can see obviously it's the beginning of April that we put them in. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So as Ron mentioned earlier, data usage in general went up, and he said, we're going to talk about video specifically because video is rather unique in the way that you can manage it, and also in the penalties if you don't manage it correctly. So if someone's speed slows down while they're loading a web page, the web page is going to take a little bit longer to load, and it may be a little annoying. But with video, you need a minimum amount of bandwidth for a certain resolution of video. So if you're watching a video at 720p and your bandwidth falls below the amount needed to deliver that video, the video stalls and buffers. And I'm sure we've all seen it. You get the little spinning a circle of death, and it really negatively impacts the subscriber experience. So you can't treat video the same way as other traffic. When you try and manage overall bandwidth on the network. As Ron mentioned, they have these unlimited with an asterisk plans, and you can't just generically slow someone down and expect their video to still work acceptably. So what we saw in this network, and we just called out the top protocols, and some of these may sound familiar. So Netflix and YouTube are always big, and then on this particular network, it's a fixed wireless network. So their next two consumers were Xbox games downloads and PS4 game downloads. You've got all these kids home from school, and they're just they're playing these games and and downloading the updates. So we talked before about how we could deal with those. So you can see the overall volume of those really can't be changed. And we talked about the techniques where we were able to shift that usage to times when it would have less impact. With the video, what we what we did is right around the time YouTube made an announcement, right around the end of March, that because there was a lot of things in the news about networks, having capacity issues because of all the extra data traffic, that they were limiting their default video resolution to 480p worldwide. Now, in the real world, that didn't always happen, but they announced it, and there was really no great blowback on that. So at this operator, what they decided to do was to say, we're gonna limit our video resolution to 480 per stream. So since this particular example is a wireless ISP, an individual account, you might have 3 or 4 devices in the home. So they didn't want to put what would normally be considered a per subscriber limit, where you would think it's one person on one phone watching one video, and limit that account to 480. They still wanted their subscribers. They wanted to have a good subscriber experience while people were home, for them to still be able to watch multiple videos in the home at one time, because there's a lot of people home, but to lessen the impact on the network and to be able to have enough bandwidth to go around. We limited each stream to 480p resolution, which limited the amount of bandwidth that it took to deliver, and also made the network capable of delivering all those. So we reduced the stalls and the buffers. So you can see in the graph, beginning in the beginning of March, how traffic just goes up and up and up and up, right up until the end of the March. And then we put this change in to optimize the video, reduce the resolution per stream, and the usage went down fairly quickly. But network bandwidth is a lot like putting extra lanes on a highway. As soon as you open it up, people use it. So we found there was a little bit of pent-up demand, and the number of videos that were being watched actually went up because we made that capacity available. So the usage went back up a little bit, but it still remained below the highs, and then it kind of leveled off. So if the operator had unlimited bandwidth, you could stack these graphs on top of each other and kind of extrapolate where the usage would likely have gone, had they not taken these steps. So between optimizing the video to reduce the overall bandwidth, and the aforementioned background protocol shifting to move that usage out of peak times, they were really able to keep because that was really their goal. As Ron mentioned in the previous slide, saving bandwidth for bandwidth's sake doesn't do anything for them. They can't put it on a shelf and sell it tomorrow. They really wanted their subscribers who are stuck at home to be able to use the network and do the things they need to do and have a good experience. And that was the goal of the policy they put in, and it worked very well for them.
And during non-coronavirus times, a lot of fixed has problems with capacity and overselling certain areas or wanting to add more customers on, and so these kind of policies really help with that.
So there we go. Okay, thank you, Ron. So on this slide, we just talk a little bit about some of the details. We're trying not to get too far in the weeds, but because video is different than other traffic and the way you have to manage it, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of how you can optimize video. So we talked in the previous slide about what the operator did was limit the per stream to 480p to save overall bandwidth. But the other opportunity that we found is that so under the hood, the way most videos are delivered is in chunks. So your video client downloads some chunk of video, your player plays it, and while it's playing it, it's downloading the next chunk, and you run into those stalls and buffers when it's not able to download the next chunk by the time the previous chunk is done playing. And most of the time that works fairly well if the resolution is matched to the network quality. But because networks aren't consistent, and especially in mobile networks, as people move around from busy to less busy places, their available bandwidth and their available experience changes. So what we found the video providers do is they tend to take as much bandwidth as they have available. So in this example, this is an example where the video resolution was being limited to 480p, but on this particular test video that we watched, was 7 minutes long. You can see that the left to its own devices, the YouTube client on the phone pulls down quite a lot of that video in the first 2 minutes. It just downloads as much as it can. And then you can see there's a gap in the middle while you're watching that buffered video. And then at the very end, it picks up and downloads a little bit more. And that was probably the ads at the end of the video or something. So the result of that is two things that are important. So one is you get these big spikes of usage on the network. But the other one is that subscriber has consumed in the first 2 minutes about 6 minutes worth of YouTube video, whether they watch it or not. And we've found some marketing companies that's actually specialized in advertising have done studies on abandon rates. And once you get past the 2 or 3 minute mark in a video, the abandon rate just starts climbing up. So in this case, this particular subscriber may have watched the whole video, but not 100% of your subscribers will. And so the result of this bursty behavior is that a lot more video traffic is downloaded than is actually watched by subscribers. So if this person abandons that video 3 minutes into the 7 minutes, they haven't consumed 3 out of 7 minutes worth of data on your network. They've consumed 6 out of 7 minutes of data on your network, and it just gets thrown away and not used. So in addition to right-sizing the resolution and making sure that subscribers get resolution that's appropriate for their device and appropriate for the network conditions, we found that pacing the speed of the actual download through what we call it smart shaping, but you can call it anything you want, so that the downloaded video stays just ahead of the playback buffer. Does several things for you. So the big one is it levels out your network usage, as you can see in the graph, and the other one, which is a hidden benefit that most people don't think about, is that you're not wasting downloaded capacity. So in this case, if this person abandoned that video 3 minutes through, they would have downloaded about 3 minutes and 15 seconds worth of video and thrown away a lot less bandwidth. So I know that was a little bit of detail, but like we said in the beginning, video is different and it needs to be treated different ways. So we found really that these two things are things that carriers can do. Is, like we said, is making sure that they're getting the appropriate resolution for the device they're carrying and the conditions of the network. And then the other one is making sure that they're not downloading video that they're not going to watch. And those two things can really make a difference in not only the network capacity, but also the subscriber experience.
Right, and that's a big thing, is we do see that it improves the customer experience when we do that. So you're saving network capacity and making things better for the customer. So that's great. The third thing that we talked about is changing congestion, location, and peak hours. So that seems obvious, but we wanted to run some graphs just to see, if that was really true. But with people not doing their normal, routine, people not going to work, obviously it's going to put stress on the network at different times and at different places. So this is one of our customers. And the important thing here is that, you can see the peak before was at 5 o'clock. So, 5 o'clock, you're getting off work, you're checking everything, you're doing all the stuff you do, hopefully not on the drive home, but you're doing that. And now I put peak after, but it should be during. But now you can see it's around 2 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock, we're hitting 50 megabytes per second on this particular carrier. And so everything's kind of shifting a little bit earlier. So, we haven't gone into detail as far as, what is making it go at 2 o'clock, other than the fact that kids are home, kids are doing homeschool. When they get done with homeschool, if they follow the trends of my children, then that's when they start getting on their games and playing games and doing all the things that they do. And then, a little bit later on, we do some more family time, when normally, if you're at an office, you might not be getting home till 6 or 7 o'clock. And so all of that's happening a lot earlier. So what we saw was about a 56.5% increase, from in the peaks. So, and then obviously location, because again, people aren't moving. So what I wanted to do was take a site that was a downtown site at one of our customers. And you can see here that most of the traffic was from 7:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the afternoon. And again, that's because, people are at the office doing what they do. But then with COVID-19, with people not going into the downtown areas and staying at home, I tried to find that site again, and it was the second most congested site prior to, and currently that is not even in the top 10 that we have. And so that means a couple things. That means that a site that is used to having congestion, and maybe someone has put policies in place at that particular site for congestion, and it's not needed anymore because it's not having congestion. But it also means that if that site's not the second most congested site, other sites are now moving up to that, and probably sites in more residential areas are moving up to the top. And so we've seen examples of that as well. So if you have certain policies or built certain sites to be able to, handle certain congestion periods, then right now during this change, a lot of that might have been work that's not really helping you right now, because the sites that weren't as busy before all of a sudden now are busy, and they're busy during the day, like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the sites from downtown aren't quite as busy. So this was an example of that. It seemed logical that that would happen, but we just wanted to go in and find some graphs to show what was happening and how that happened. And so, Frank, again, if you can just, describe the solution that we put in place for some of these carriers, that would be great.
Yeah, and so really, it like Ron mentioned, is when we first talk to operators about their strategy, depending on their goals, and one of the big goals with policy is to have fair usage and manage traffic in times and places of congestion. They start by looking at the usual suspects, their busy hours and their busy sites. And it's certainly possible to manage traffic that way, to say, we know that our busy hours are, like Ron mentioned, 5 to 7 p.m. during drive time, or 8 to 10 p.m. during prime time video watching. And we know residential versus business areas, but that can and will change. Not even from unusual events like today, but just holiday weekends, weekday versus weekend, different things like that. So we always start by encouraging operators to define conditions instead of defining rigid fixed times and locations, to say, like we talked about in the example with the background traffic. They didn't make a rule that said we're going to limit background traffic during these specific times. They said we're going to limit background traffic during these conditions. When a site reached X% of its capacity, we're going to then limit it. And the nice thing about that is that automatically compensates for these kinds of things. When traffic moves from one place to another, or one time to another, once it reaches those conditions, it triggers those policies. And just like Ron mentioned with this graph, it seems obvious when you say it, but it's not always the first reaction that operators have, because as an industry, we're so conditioned to talking about the busy hour. You hear the word, the two words busy hour are probably the most, or at least in the top 5 of the 2 words I've heard in my entire time in wireless. When we talk about KPIs, what are my busy hour KPIs, or what's this during the busy hour? And that's nice, but the busy hour is not a fixed event. And so we always try and get operators away from making conditions based on the time on a clock, and instead of making decisions based on observed conditions. And that just that one thing really helps operators out a lot.
And right now, I mean, we don't know what the future holds. So, there's starting to be some relaxation, and people are going back. And so we're seeing some of this stuff shift. But depending on what the fall brings, it could shift right back, or it could go back to the way it was. And then many people are going to, work from home anyway going forward. So there's just a lot of things that you have to worry about. And having a conditional policy means that you don't really have to worry about it because it's going to pick it up automatically. So the last one was increased use of communication apps. And so we did see a lot of that. So you can see before the pandemic hit, it was 500,000. And then afterwards or during, it got up to 1 million. So it doubled in usage just in a month's period of time. And so those are kind of the things that we watch as well. And we know that customers are going to want to put some policies in place for that. And again, those policies, IM doesn't really take a lot of bandwidth. So it's a little bit different what we want to do with that. So, mostly it's goodwill stuff. So prioritizing instant messaging was important, and Frank can talk about that. But excluding IM from counting toward data buckets is something that you can let customers know you're doing, and it really doesn't have that much of an impact on the overall because it doesn't use a lot of data. And so that's something that just builds some goodwill in the community. And also there are some subscribers that might not have current data plans, and some new subscribers that are financially challenged and might not be able to afford a data plan. So during times like this, some of our customers wanted to create an IM only plan so that at least you can keep in touch and you can be in touch with the people that you love. So so we were able to do that, and we can create some flexible data plans like an IM only. We can exclude the instant messaging traffic from data buckets, and then the prioritization I'll let Frank talk about.
Yeah, so and I realize I've said this about every protocol. So instant message traffic is a little unique, and once again, it has to be handled a little differently. And so if you look at this graph, it's when we first pulled it up, I thought maybe it wouldn't be obvious of the story it's telling, but once we reviewed it, I think it says some important things. So this is a different operator than some of the other ones we talked about, and they have this same curve that we see, starting and going up into March, and the traffic really took off, and this peak in the middle is right around the 3rd week of March. So overall traffic climbed, right? And we've kind of streamlined it into broad categories to make it to tell the story a little better. So this pink is streaming protocols, video. That dark purple on the bottom is any kind of instant messaging app, whether it's FaceTime, or whether it's WhatsApp or any of those other things. And then the tan is just the rest of the traffic. So you can see traffic went up, and as Ron mentioned, that instant messaging traffic, even though it's not a large percentage of the traffic, it almost doubled. And it is very sensitive to latency and congestion. Just like it's very similar to voice over IP traffic. It's not a huge amount of traffic, but it is sensitive to congestion, sensitive to latency, and really to work well, it needs priority. So besides all the KPIs the operator was seeing on their network as the usage went up, they were getting calls from customers that they were having trouble with some of these applications. And because people were at home and wanting to know how their friends and family were doing, that communication was very important to them. So the customers were very sensitive towards it. So we did two things for them is what they decided to do. So one was, as we've talked about, they did some video optimization. They set some limits on the video resolution based on network conditions. And you can see that that larger pink bar, when that policy went in place, that video traffic started going down. But what's interesting is at the same time, you see that instant messaging traffic did not. And so one is that just like file downloads, that traffic is not, you can't compress it or reduce it. It is what it is. And because it's latency sensitive, we actually gave that a higher priority than some of this other traffic that we lumped into the other bucket, non-interactive non-foreground traffic, so that those subscribers would be able to use the apps that were important to them. And because it uses, not a large percentage of the traffic on the network, the operator could make that decision and be able to support it. So they really had the win-win that they were able to make the apps that were important to their customers work well, and then save capacity by deprioritizing the things that they weren't seeing, that weren't interactive, or the things that that weren't as important to them.
Great. So, so that's the COVID-19 policies that went into place were what we were talking about. Some other, just at the end here, to talk about popular policies that we do for our customers. So obviously, roaming is a big one. We do have roaming policies, and you can see there that we can control roaming by all kinds of different ways. The flexibility of TTM is important. So we can do it by individual usage, by roaming network, by speed. We can do things with the protocol to make sure there's no background, data going on while someone is roaming. And you can see down at the bottom, the benefits, the TTM roaming policies. They will always save 20% on roaming costs just by putting policies in that customers don't even know that you're putting policies in. And then obviously we've had some people be a lot more aggressive with their roaming policies, and they saved a much higher percentage. In that particular case, the subscribers knew it, but that's what they wanted to do. The other part is the flexible, innovative data plans. So the unlimited plans where it's high-speed data and HD video. We can do some unlimited data plans where they only have standard video, and we can reduce the speeds and all the things you see the other carriers doing. Social media only. You can see before we did the instant messaging only. So so a lot of flexibility when it comes to TTM. I did want to show some of the reports. So all the reports here, and I won't read them all, but they all are available, and they come every week, and then they come on a monthly basis and a weekly basis. And so you get those. And then if you needed custom reports, if there's something in particular that you wanted to report on, then we can put those together for you. And again, the way our service is, we have professional service hours. And so we allow people to do stuff like that, and it's not going to cost them any extra money to do that. And then here is just the difference between regular policy management and ClearSky's TTM. And some of the biggest, of course, we've said it a couple times, is that we work with the teams, we recommend, we write the policies, we implement the policies, we do all of that instead of just selling you a box and telling you good luck. So we write the policies, implement them, make sure they're not affecting other policies, make recommendations, and then obviously it gives you a predictable monthly invoice instead of, if you want something done, someone has to send someone on site and camp out in your facility and charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm sure you all are familiar with that process, but with ours, we build in those professional service hours so that you don't have to. And I'll end it here and give it back over to Lucy with the obligatory technical slide for all the people that like boxes and lines. And I'll leave that up there so you can see it. And if there's any questions, then let Lucy know. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Frank.
Great, thanks, Ron. As he mentioned, we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. We have just a couple of minutes left, so if you have any questions, feel free to submit them, but we'll go ahead and jump right in. Our first question, does this work on 3G or just 4G networks?
Frank?
Yep. Yeah. So that is a good question, because we talk about voice over LTE and other things like that. But yes, so this is all IP traffic management. So whether you have a legacy CDMA network, 4G LTE, if you've got if you're a triple play, if you've got cable and DSL and wireless, as long as it's IP data, we can measure it, manage it, and do the kinds of things we talked about.
Great, thank you. Our next question, how many policies does it include?
Yeah, so like I said, we give a certain amount of professional service hours, And so what we try to do is make sure that you have enough professional service hours to write the policies that you need and get everything done, especially, times like these when things come up. We want you to be able to use the product. There have been a few cases where people have used more than their policy hours, and we had to charge a little bit extra. We always let people know that. We had one carrier specifically that had a SAP-C that they were sunlighting, and they had TTM as well. So they wanted obviously all the policies that were in their SAP-C to move over to TTM and replace that. So they were able to do that. But for the most part, under normal circumstances, the policies that you write won't cost you any more money. The policies that we write.
Great, thank you. And we have time for just one additional question. So the last one, are you seeing data traffic change back to normal more now?
Yeah, so we have kept an eye a little bit on that. So the slides that we saw earlier were from June 5th. So that's been a couple weeks. And, as things loosen up and people are able to get out and drive around and enjoy things a little bit more, we are seeing, things go a little bit back to normal. But as I said before, we don't know what's going to happen here soon. So we're just keeping an eye on things, talking to our customers and letting them know what's going on. So we're seeing a little bit of a change, but not a dramatic change. I think most people are going to be working from home for quite some time.
Great, thank you. And so that concludes our webinar this afternoon. Ron, Frank, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Frank, did you have something?
No, I think I've said plenty.
Great. Yeah. And same with me. We, the main thing I want to highlight is just the flexibility of the product, and that we're able to change with the times and not cost the customer any additional money, but still allow the customer to be able to deal with the changing environment.
Great. Well, thank you both again. Thank you, ClearSky, for sponsoring today's webinar, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz.
Bye.